Listen, I don't fit so well into these neat little stages of life boxes. I just keep going. And uh, I'm always looking for something new, and I respond to what's out there. And if anything, at this stage of my life, in my 70s, I'm more eager for new adventure. And my mantra to myself is say yes, do it, in other words. And I never regret anything I've done. I only regret things I haven't done.
If Betty Friedan only regrets what she has not done, she doesn't have many regrets because she has done a lot. Born in Peoria, Illinois in 1921, she has been a leader from her earliest school days. She went east to a women's college in the early 1940s, attending Smith College at the same time as did future First Ladies Nancy Reagan and Barbara Bush. As editor of the student paper, she honed her writing and organizational talents and was interested in public policy. In an era when a college education for a female was often seen as a preparation for marriage to a successful man, Betty Friedan stood out as a future doer in her own right. She entered graduate school in Berkeley, where she studied psychology under Erik Erikson. On her way to completing a doctorate, she gave in to the thinking of the day that a professorship would preclude a family life and discontinued her formal education. Betty Friedan married in 1947 and had 3 children. After the birth of her second child, she left her office job and wrote articles about homemaking for the women's magazines of the time. These magazines presented a rosy view of the domestic lives of women, which did not match Miss Friedan's own experiences. In 1963, her best-selling book, The Feminine Mystique, was published. It criticized the limited roles American society offered women and was instrumental in triggering the women's movement. Betty Friedan used her new fame to organize the National Organization of Women to improve the status of women. One interviewer saw this as an invasion.
Mrs. Friedan, women have invaded just about every field, professional, business, and just about everything else you can mention. Why do you feel that an organization such as yours is necessary at this time?
You know, that's an illusion. There are a few women in every field today, but the great majority of American women are not participating in terms of their full potential and ability in the mainstream of American society.
The movement sought changes in the law and in cultural practices. It is hard to imagine how different things were before. Men had the huge majority of places in law and medical schools, and women were trained for less prestigious positions. Even want ads were segregated by gender. Betty Friedan has opposed all forms of segregation all her life. She continues to argue for full participation in our society for all people, regardless of race, age, or gender. Now in her mid-70s, she leads a full life, balancing time with her extended family and her professional activities. She is still organizing, seeking better systems for all to live well on this earth.
In a certain sense, if you want me to sum up what I feel that my work is now, is to translate the women's issues and all the energy that we put into the women's movement into priorities for the whole society. Where we are in this rich, powerful nation, we are in a position to much more clearly, in terms of conceptually, and even in terms of measurements, to put the values of life first. And that every bit as important as the, what's it called, GDP or GDP, should be some new index of life, of the environment and the welfare of women, men, and children, old and young, sick and well. And if there isn't such an index, this work that I'm going to be doing in the next few years at Cornell, and I want to develop one. The terms are still being defined by men. Listen, women have more power than they're using. You know, the power to change the priorities of the agenda. It's not being done to the degree I think it could be done. We're still, moldering around and fighting little battles within the male model, whereas I think the point in history is a transformation of the model, a paradigm shift, if you will. And as you know, of course, this becomes more pointed as we head toward the millennium. For instance, David Gutman, who's a very good gerontologist, and he had this concept of the crossover, that in midlife, about when the time the grandchildren start being born, so the woman becomes assertive and aggressive, and the man lets out his more tender, feminine side. Now that could be true of my generation or his generation, but I wonder in the future, when our young men carry the baby in the backpack, my sons certainly are very hands-on fathers. I mean, it's not like the mother's the only one that can handle the baby. They are hands-on, equal parents in a very strong way. The suppression of feeling that was supposed to be a part of masculinity is lessening. That's changing. So, furthermore, women are now allowed, encouraged, and have to be assertive and aggressive. And earlier in life, they don't wait till any crossover after the menopause, because they have the careers and the work, the jobs, and the enormous majority of women are now working outside the home, even mothers of little children. So all those things that sort of were considered to be new crossovers at age and so on are going to happen earlier in life. So then, what about age? Reality for age, for both women and men in America, is far ahead of imagery. I mean, what images do we have of vital engagement, involvement in the basic human condition for people over 50, over 60, over 70, over 80? We don't. I mean, well, what are the basic human dimensions? Work and love. But you have to work the way you worked when you were 40 or not work at all. You have to love the way you loved when you were 30 or not love at all. We have no images at each person's experience when they discover to their amazement that it's not dead, love, sex, all the rest of it. Or that their abilities have not atrophied and that they even can do something new and master it. Well, I'm not sure that retirement isn't an obsolete concept, that there is no need, for instance, in terms of decline in intelligence or function, for people to, quote unquote, retire from work or from society at 60 or 65. You could say, well, people need to get out, so younger people, there's room for younger people. But there's not been serious social policy thinking about what to do with the great human resource of the abilities of the great, great numbers of people that continue to grow and develop and whose life experience would be of great value to society as they go into their 60s and 70s, and how to use that. And I think that this is what's wrong today, is too much exclusion of people on account of age, or making a self-fulfilling prophecy of age as something less or other than fully utilized human, participant. Anybody talks about age in this country, and even too much in the field of gerontology itself, it's in terms of deterioration, decline, pathology, age as sickness, age as passive objects or victims of care, if you will. Okay. The new possibilities of vital, autonomous age in a lifespan that now life expectancy is 80 for women in America. Men, only 72. We had to break through the male rigidities so that men will live longer, as long as women. And the numbers that we used to think of for 70s simply do not describe what I'm doing, where I am, what I'm feeling. I have a number of friends in their 80s, and it's the same thing is true. They are very vital. They are not in deterioration or decline, especially the ones I know, men and women, that are still very much involved. Because if you continue to stay involved in work, in life, in the community, you continue to grow and develop past 40, past 50, past 60, and I have to say of myself, past 70.
So we want to keep healthy brains. We want to understand how they're formed and learn ways to keep them healthy for our full 100 years. Doesn't that sound like a good thing?
Marion Diamond, eminent molecular biologist at California, she little baby rats or mice, and put them in take them from an isolated cage and put them in the cage with a lot of puzzles to solve, mazes, things to play with, other rats. And they're dendrites. Then you do an autopsy of the brain, and you can see the dendrites growing. But you do this with rats, the equivalent of middle-aged human beings, rats, the equivalent of 90-year-old human beings, and the same thing happens. The dendrites start growing again. The dendrites start growing. And I ran into her in a conference recently, a Renaissance weekend, something like that. So I said, well, what's new? And she said, well, I decided to apply a little of my research to myself. She said, I decided I was spending too much time alone in my lab. So I had to program myself to interact with the other rats more, You know what I think are almost obscene concepts, like leisure world, or, my mother lived in a leisure world. Well, she kept herself plenty busy. My mother, a lot of my abilities and energy, and she was a masterful, life master, contract bridge. And she ran around running duplicate bridge tournaments till she was 87. And some stupid doctor, because she had a little diabetes or she had some back pain, made her retire as a duplicate bridge manager, and I think that killed her. But she didn't have any purposes to, then she had a fall. And so they said, well, she shouldn't live alone anymore. So she went into, I suppose it was a glorified nursing home. Well, I went to see her there, and I just think she said, what am I doing here? She just chose to die. In other words, I should never have permitted it. But what did I know, then about, I hadn't, started doing this research, yet. But the very concept of a nursing home is anathema to me. Not that we don't need hospitals when we're ill, but for our last years, it doesn't seem to me that what we need is nursing homes. We need new ways to be autonomous and vital in the work and the life of the community. I suppose one of these days I'll die in my traces. But that would suit me just fine. In other words, I just intend to go on living as far as I'm concerned. I'm not, going to die before I have to, and I'm not going to, certainly not going to die while I'm still alive, So I continue to get involved in new projects and think about new adventures as if there is no tomorrow, and maybe that's denial. But I doubt it. I mean, well, no, I don't doubt it. I mean, it probably is denial, but perhaps it's a healthy denial. In other words, as long as I'm alive, I'm going to live. And when I'm dead, I'm dead, I think that your intelligence keeps evolving, and that you put this lifetime experience together. Therefore, if you are in this mode, I want to call it wisdom, you see the new questions, not necessarily the answers, but the new questions, and you can trust some instinct of what has to happen next. I think there is an ability to bridge what seem to be insoluble dilemmas and put it all together, or at least be able to deal comfortably with ambiguity, contradictions, transcend polarization, move through a lot of stuff, and get to the crucial question, the questions that have to be asked, the new questions, even if you don't see the answers. There was this poem of Rilke that I quoted in the front of one of my books. That don't worry if you can't find the answer, just live the question. When I look back on what I've done in my life in this regard, in the feminine mystique and helping to start the women's movement, and it's awesome, as my grandson would say, that I was able to put things together in a way that helped the society evolve and certainly led to a new sense of possibility for women. And where I sense we are now, I'm beyond gender. I mean, we are now at the point where, for women with an 80-year lifespan, the years beyond reproduction exceed the reproductive years. No, in other words, you're going to live, reproduction ends around 40, and you're going to live till 80. So, I mean, in other words, to define women as they have been defined up till now, really in terms of their reproductive role, their role in reproducing the species is not adequate anymore. Women now have as many years beyond their reproductive years as the years leading up to and including their reproductive years. And women individually, move into careers beyond, after they've had children, or the younger women, while they're still having children. I think we still define women in terms of their reproductive role, whereas the years beyond that are really, there are more adult years beyond it. If we could get in our consciousness, and we haven't yet, that we are going to live this 80-year lifespan, then I think, we could relax more and realize that we can do an awful lot of things, and they don't have to do them all at once. And we can be much more open to risk, to adventure, and even in our career thinking. We say from the beginning, well, I might have 2 careers, I might have 3 careers, and have some parts of life where I don't have a career necessarily, and be comfortable with that. In other words, would loosen our thinking a lot. And then for women, for instance, this idea of these insoluble dilemmas, work and family, career and children, well, they're not insoluble dilemmas. They're pieces of a complex life that have to be put together in new and diverse ways. And you don't have to do it all at once. And if you got into your mind that there's plenty of time, the career progressions, the career lines of training and advancing careers have all been based on the lives of the men of the past, whose wives took care of the details of life.
Yeah.
Well, in the future,
You have a big girl.
the men won't have such wives. The women certainly don't have such wives. And so I think we start thinking about life in terms of complex changing patterns through the years of family, of work, of private and political passions, pursuits that are not even necessarily career, and people putting them together in many more diverse ways over time. And that's so that what seem to be dilemmas today, what were people stewing around so for? They'll think about it 10 years from now,
Betty Friedan ended her book on aging, The Fountain of Age, with a challenge to her generation. She wrote, "Through our actions, we will create a new image of age, free and joyous. Living with pain,
if you continue to stay involved,
saying what we
work
really
and
think
life
and
and the
feel
community,
at last.
you continue to grow and develop.
For our full 100 years.
Knowing who we are, realizing that we know more than we ever knew we knew. Not afraid of what anyone thinks of us anymore. Moving with wonder into that unknown future we have helped to shape for the generations coming after us.